The frozen silence. The night was the kind that swallowed whole towns and buried secrets beneath layers of frost. Snow fell in thick sheets, swirling in the glare of Leo Hunter's high beams as he guided his 18-wheeler down a deserted stretch of Highway 74. The windshield wipers struggled to keep up, squeaking against the glass like an anxious heartbeat. Leo wasn't supposed to be here. His shift should have ended 4 hours ago. He'd made a promise to his sister, one night off, dinner, maybe a game with his nephew. But a delayed freight pickup in Fargo sent him hurtling into the heart of this storm. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, knuckles bone-white. The cab heater blew hot air, but the cold clung to the edges of the truck like it had a personal vendetta. This part of Minnesota wasn't known for hospitality, especially not after dark. He glanced at the empty passenger seat. No music tonight, just the hiss of snow on glass and the rhythmic growl of the diesel engine. Leo had driven for 17 years, long enough to know when something felt off. Tonight wasn't just bad weather. There was something else in the air. Something heavy. Watching. He squinted through the storm, headlights carving a narrow path through the darkness. That's when he saw it. A flicker. A shape. He leaned forward. No, not a shape. A person. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him, a mirage brought on by fatigue and too much gas station coffee. But as he drew closer, the figure became clearer, a small silhouette hunched on the side of the road, almost buried in a snowdrift. Jesus, he muttered, easing off the gas and flipping on his hazards. The truck groaned to a halt. Leo jammed the gear stick into park, yanked his coat from behind the seat, and leaped down from the cab. The snow swallowed his boots with every step. Cold bit into his face like broken glass. He reached the figure. No, the girl. And his breath caught. She was maybe 17, maybe younger. Pale skin. Blue lips. Wearing nothing but a light dress and a torn coat, completely wrong for this kind of cold. Her arms were curled tight around her chest, but her body was still. "Hey," he said, crouching down. "Can you hear me?" No response. He brushed snow from her face. Her eyelids twitched. A weak flutter of breath escaped her lips. Alive. Barely. Leo didn't waste time. He scooped her up, so light it hurt to feel, and hurried back to the cab. Inside, he laid her gently on the passenger seat, cranked the heater, and pulled a thick wool blanket from behind the seats. Her face was ghost pale, her fingers stiff. Hypothermia was already setting in. "Come on," he murmured, unscrewing his thermos. "Just a sip." She stirred faintly, head lolling. "Come on, sweetheart. You're safe now." The girl coughed once, too weak to even open her eyes. Leo reached for his CB radio. Nothing but static. "Of course," he muttered. "Storm must have killed the signal." His cell phone wasn't any better. No signal. Not even one bar. There was a truck stop 18 miles ahead. He remembered seeing it on his last trip. Old school, barely lit, but they had a landline. Maybe even a nurse on call. He threw the truck into gear, tires whining as they fought for traction. "Just hold on, kid," he said, casting a glance at her curled form. "We'll get you help. I promise." Then, just as he was accelerating into the snowy void, she moved. A whisper escaped her lips, barely audible over the hum of the heater. "Don't let him." Leo's eyes snapped to her. "Don't let who?" he asked, but her head lolled again. A chill, not from the cold, trickled down his spine. He leaned over to adjust the blanket when something fell from the girl's pocket. A slim leather wallet. Leo stared at it. He didn't want to go through her things, but she was unconscious. Maybe there was an emergency contact inside. Parents, someone looking for her. He picked it up, flipped it open. Driver's permit. Name. Isabella Rhodes. The breath caught in his throat. No, it couldn't be. Leo's heart hammered. His fingers clenched the leather case like it might vanish. Rhodes. He hadn't heard that name in 8 years. Not since the trial. Not since the day his entire world changed. He swallowed hard and looked at her again. Really looked this time. Long brown hair, sharp jawline, high cheekbones. God, she looked just like her. Just like Alina Rhodes, his best friend, his partner, the woman who died in his arms, and the daughter she left behind. Leo jerked the wheel slightly, snapping himself out of the spiral. It didn't matter how she ended up here. All that mattered now was keeping her alive. But deep down, he knew this wasn't just a rescue. This was fate. This girl had been dropped in his path for a reason. And whatever storm she'd run from, it was far from over. The neon sign buzzed faintly above the diner. Buck's Gas and Grill. One of those off-the-map places where time had stopped somewhere around 1997. 2 gas pumps. One flickering light. A rusted-out truck parked near the garage. Leo pulled into the lot and parked. The girl was still unconscious but breathing. He wrapped the blanket tighter around her and rushed inside. The bell above the door jingled. A man in overalls sat at the counter sipping black coffee. The cashier, a woman in her 60s, looked up from a crossword puzzle. "Storm's only getting worse," she said. "You lost." "I need help," Leo said, panting slightly. "There's a girl in my truck. She's unconscious. I think she's in shock." The woman was already moving around the counter. "She breathing?" "Barely." "We've got a back room. Bring her inside. I'll call for help." Leo ran back out, scooped the girl into his arms, and carried her inside. The warmth of the diner hit him like a wall. They laid her down in the small staff room beside a humming soda machine. The woman, Kathy, according to her name tag, covered her with another blanket. "I'll call 911, she said, grabbing the phone from the wall. But it didn't work. No dial tone. "Dan, lines froze," she muttered. "I'll try the radio." Leo sat on a stool, watching the girl's chest rise and fall. She was safe. For now. But that name, Rhodes, kept echoing in his mind. 8 years ago, he'd walked away from everything after Alina was killed. She trusted the wrong people, trusted the wrong system. Leo had tried to protect her, but it hadn't been enough. And now her daughter had shown up on a desolate highway, half frozen to death, whispering about someone chasing her. Leo didn't believe in coincidences, and if Isabella Rhodes was out here alone, then someone powerful didn't want her found. He looked at the girl, eyes filled with questions. Whatever she was running from, Leo was going to face it head-on. Because he'd already failed one Rhodes, he wouldn't fail another. The girl who wasn't supposed to live. The soft hum of the soda machine buzzed like a lullaby behind them. The storm outside was still howling, muffled by the thin walls of the truck stop's back room. Leo sat on a folding chair, his jacket still half-buttoned, eyes fixed on the girl lying under a pile of mismatched blankets. Isabella Rhodes. It had been almost an hour since he found her by the road. An hour since her whisper, "Don't let him," scratched its way into his soul. She hadn't spoken since. But Leo couldn't stop staring. He saw her mother in every inch of her. Alina's sharp cheekbones, her stubborn chin, her haunted eyes. And it made him feel like the dead had found a way back. "You all right, hon?" Kathy's voice broke the silence. She was leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Leo gave a half-smile. "Something like that." Kathy narrowed her eyes. "I tried the CB again. Still nothing. Landline's out. Looks like we're cut off until morning, or until the storm lets up." Leo nodded. "She needs a hospital." "She needs a lot of things," Kathy said gently. "But right now, you're the only thing she's got." Leo looked back at Isabella. Her breathing had steadied. She was still out cold, but color had returned to her cheeks. He exhaled, pushing a hand through his snow-damp hair. Kathy hesitated, then asked, "You know her?" He paused, then lied. No, never seen her before tonight. Kathy raised a skeptical eyebrow, but didn't press. Storm's a mean one tonight, she said instead, changing the subject. Funny how it brings people together, or tears them apart. Leo didn't answer. Because deep down, he knew this wasn't just a snowstorm. This was the start of a reckoning. FLASHBACK, 8 years ago, Chicago, Illinois, a warehouse by the river. The night Alina Rhodes died, Leo had blood on his hands. Not hers, but close enough. She had been working undercover, exposing one of the largest smuggling rings in the Midwest, a high-stakes operation run by a man named Patrick Langley, a real estate mogul who used his company as a front for everything from human trafficking to illegal arms shipments. Alina had gone too deep, trusted the wrong person, and by the time Leo realized the trap was closing, it was too late. She died on the concrete floor of that warehouse with Leo kneeling beside her, a gunshot wound in her side, whispering the name Izzy. She had a daughter. She made Leo promise, protect her, and then she was gone. Leo never found the girl. She vanished into the system, another orphan swallowed by the state. Until now. Until the snow, the road, the girl half frozen on the shoulder. Leo felt it in his bones. This was her. This was Izzy. Paris back room of the H.Traki stop. Isabella stirred. Leo leaned forward. Her fingers twitched against the blanket. Then, slowly, her eyelids fluttered open. Green eyes, just like her mother's. Hey, Leo said gently. Easy now. You're safe. She blinked, confused, disoriented. Her lips parted but no sound came. You're at a truck stop, he said. I found you by the road. You were unconscious. Hypothermic. You're okay now. She tried to sit up, but her body betrayed her. She winced and collapsed back against the pillow. Don't rush it, Leo said. You need rest. Then her voice, weak, raspy, but there, slid through the quiet. Did he follow me? Leo's stomach sank. Who? She shook her head slightly. I don't know his name. He had gloves. A scar on his cheek. He was waiting at the bus stop in Fargo. I never got on. Leo stiffened. She knew she was being hunted. This wasn't random. Why was he after you? He asked. She blinked slowly. Because I saw something. Leo's hands curled into fists. What did you see? She turned her face toward the ceiling, eyes glassy. There was a file. In my foster father's study. Locked drawer. I was looking for old photos of my mom. I found something else. Leo didn't interrupt. He let her speak. It had names, codes, account numbers, photos. One of them was a man I saw on the news last week, Senator Travis Neal. Leo's blood chilled. That name rang bells. Loud ones. Isabella continued. There was a line under his picture. Just 5 words. Secured. Route through South Haven. That's all. But there were pages, dozens of them. She took a breath. And then I heard the front door open. My foster dad never comes home early. I had to hide. I left the drawer open. Leo exhaled through his nose. This wasn't just a scared girl. This was a witness. What happened next? They started packing. He made a call. Said, she knows. They didn't even try to find me. Just ran. I grabbed what I could. The flash drive. Some cash. I didn't even take a jacket. Leo stared at her. She was shaking again, this time not from the cold. I thought I'd get to Minneapolis, she said softly. But the roads closed. The storm hit. I didn't even make it out of that county. Then, everything went black. Leo stood slowly, crossed the room, and knelt beside her. You don't know me, he said, but I knew your mother, a long time ago. She was the bravest person I ever met. Isabella's eyes widened. You knew her? He nodded. Alina was my friend, my partner. She trusted me, and she made me promise to protect you. Isabella looked stunned, like someone had just reached inside her and opened a locked box she didn't know she had. Leo placed a hand gently on her shoulder. I'm going to get you out of this. I don't care how many people come after you. They're going to have to go through me. Later, da to night. Leo stood outside the truck stop, wind battering his coat. The snow was letting up. Visibility had improved. He pulled out his phone. 1 bar. Enough. He didn't call 911. Not yet. Instead, he scrolled to a number saved under a false name, one he hadn't used in 5 years. Contact. Ranger. No questions. He hit call. 1 ring. 2. Then a click. Leo, the voice said. It's been a minute. I need help, Leo said. And this time it's not for me. There was a pause. You found her, didn't you? Leo's silence was answer enough. Where are you? Route 74. Buck stop. She's in bad shape. I'll be there by sunrise, the voice said. Keep her safe. Then the line went dead. Inside, Trukiki stopped diner. 4:00 a.m. The lights buzzed low. A lone trucker sipped coffee in the corner. The waitress slept in the back. Leo sat across from Isabella at a booth. She was bundled up, nursing a warm cup of cocoa. Her color had returned. Her voice was stronger. I can't go to the police, she said. They're part of it. One of the names I saw was a sheriff. Leo nodded. We're not going to the police. We're going to someone who knows how to make people like this disappear. You trust him? With my life, Leo said. She hesitated, then reached into her pocket. The flash drive. She slid it across the table. You should keep this, she whispered. I don't want to be the only one. Leo picked it up. It was warm from her hands, but it felt cold as death. You know they'll never stop, she said. I know, and anyone helping me becomes a target. Leo gave her a slow, steady look. Kid, he said, I've been a target before. I know how to make it expensive. She smiled, the first smile he'd seen from her. Small, sad, but real. Outside, unmarked SUV, idling 100 yards away. A pair of binoculars dropped slowly from a gloved hand. She's alive, the man said into a radio. Confirmed, with someone else. An adult male, possibly ex-military. A pause. Yes, sir. I'll wait for instructions. He clicked off, then reached under his coat and chambered a round into his pistol. The game had begun. The man from nowhere. The sun had not yet broken the horizon, but the storm had passed, leaving behind a ghostly quiet. Snow blanketed everything in a white stillness that felt almost sacred. But Leo Hunter knew better than to trust peace like this. Snow might cover footprints, but not intentions. Inside the truck stop, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering as if they, too, were unsure about what was coming next. Isabella sat at the corner booth, cradling a cup of coffee between her hands. Her face was pale but calm. Too calm for a 17-year-old who'd narrowly escaped death. Leo watched her from the counter, silently amazed. This girl wasn't broken. She was forged. There was something in her, something steel-like, hidden behind those green eyes. Alina's spirit, her fight, her defiance. But that defiance was going to need backup. Leo's contact was due to arrive any minute now. And if he was the same man Leo remembered, it was about to get interesting. Outside, 6:05 a.m., the sound of tires crunching over snow broke the silence. Leo's head snapped up. He looked out the window. A matte black SUV rolled into the parking lot, stopping a few feet from the pumps. No license plates. Windows tinted so dark they looked like obsidian. Leo's jaw clenched. He's early. He stood and moved to Isabella. Stay here, he said. Keep your head down. Don't talk to anyone. No matter what. She nodded, but her eyes followed him with unease. Leo stepped outside into the cold. The SUV door opened with a quiet click. A man stepped out. Tall, mid-40s, black wool coat, clean-shaven, sharp eyes. He didn't smile. He didn't move like a civilian. He moved like someone who'd memorized the weight of a gun, the angles of ambush, the silence of the grave. Leo approached him, arms loose at his sides. "You're late," Leo said with a smirk. The man raised an eyebrow. "You're lucky I came at all. Still good with explosives. Better with secrets." Leo paused. "Thanks for coming, Mason." Mason Kane, the man you called when the rules didn't apply. When you needed help and couldn't afford a trace. Mason wasn't law enforcement. He wasn't military anymore either. He was something else. The man who existed between justice and revenge. A ghost in plain sight. Mason glanced toward the truck stop. "She's inside." Leo nodded. "She say what she's running from." Leo handed him the flash drive. Names, faces, codes, power. Mason turned the drive over in his hand, whistling softly. "You always did know how to pick your problems." "This one picked me," Leo replied. "And her name is Isabella Rhodes." Mason froze. Rhodes. He looked up, his expression unreadable. "Alina's daughter." Leo nodded. A long silence passed between them. Mason's voice softened. "I thought she died in the system." "So did I." Inside DA Treaty Key Stop. 10 minutes later. Mason sat across from Isabella. He didn't smile. Didn't introduce himself with warmth. But he wasn't cold either. He studied her like a puzzle. Like a threat and a promise wrapped in one. "You remember your mother?" he asked. "A little," Isabella said. "Mostly bedtime stories." "And the way she smelled. Like cinnamon and rain." Mason's eyes flickered. That shook him more than he let on. "She was special," he said finally. "She died doing the right thing. Something most people don't." "Did you know her?" Isabella asked. "I knew her well enough to know you shouldn't be out here alone," Mason said. "And well enough to know why people might kill to erase her name from memory." He slid the flash drive back to her. "I've seen enough," he said. "The people on that list. They don't operate in daylight. They operate in systems. Courtrooms. Boardrooms. Newsrooms. They don't leave fingerprints. They leave shadows." Isabella tightened her fingers around the cup. "Then how do we stop them?" Mason looked at her. "You don't." Leo bristled. "Mason." "But," Mason said, holding up a finger, "you can burn their house down. If you hit the right beam." He pulled out a small, nondescript laptop and opened it. Within seconds, he was running code, decrypting the drive faster than Leo could follow. Mason was many things, but slow wasn't one of them. Leo leaned closer. "What are you looking for?" "Not what," Mason said. "Who?" FLASHBACK. Mason's past. 12 years ago. Mason Kane had once been embedded in a covert operation called Ghostline, a rogue intelligence cell designed to operate where governments couldn't. One mission had put him directly in conflict with Patrick Langley. He buried that file, burned the names, but one name had survived. Vin Drake. A fixer, a cleaner, a man whose job was simple: erase threats, erase people. Langley used him once, and then he disappeared. Until now. Pari isn't true UKAS dope. Mason found the file. There he was. Vin Drake. Alias, the broker. Last seen in South Haven, Missouri. Coordinates were embedded in the metadata. A location. A lead. Leo leaned over the screen. "We go there." Mason looked at him. "You sure?" "She nearly died in the snow last night," Leo said. "I'm not waiting for them to come again. I can't guarantee your safety. I'm not asking for safety." Isabella stood. Her voice was calm. I'm going with you. Leo opened his mouth to argue. I'm going, she repeated. This started with me. I'm not hiding in the backseat while someone else fights my war. Mason gave a slight nod of approval. Leo sighed. All right, he said. Then we move. Now. Later at TH8 today. On the road to South Haven. The black SUV sliced through the wet highway. The snow now slush beneath the tires. Inside, Leo drove, Mason in the passenger seat, Isabella asleep in the back, wrapped in blankets. They passed silent towns, rusted silos. Empty fields stretched to the horizon. Leo broke the silence. Why didn't you tell me you stayed in the game? He asked Mason. Because it stopped being a game. Leo nodded slowly. And why are you helping me now? Mason looked ahead. Because Alina saved my life once. And this is the last thing I owe her. Leo glanced at him. After this, we're square. Mason gave a faint smirk. Not even close. South Haven, abandoned motel. Night. The SUV rolled to a stop outside a crumbling motel. The sign read Silver Crest Inn, though most of the letters had long since fallen off. Mason got out first, scanning the perimeter. Leo followed, gun tucked inside his coat. They approached room 6. Mason knocked once. Silence. Then the door creaked open. A man in a gray hoodie stood there, cigarette glowing in the dark. He looked at Mason, then at Leo, then at Isabella. You brought her, he said flatly. You owe me, Vin, Mason replied. The man, Vin Drake, exhaled smoke. I owed you once, he said. Now you've brought heat to my door. We need names, Leo said. Real names. From the list. Vin flicked his cigarette. Some fires can't be put out, he said. And some girls aren't supposed to live long enough to light them. Leo's blood turned cold. What did you say? Vin opened the door wider. And behind him was a wall of photographs. Victims, journalists, judges, whistleblowers, people who once tried to expose the machine. All dead, all gone, all erased. Isabella stepped forward, trembling. Vin looked at her with an expression that was neither guilt nor pity, just cold recognition. You're the match, he said, but are you ready to burn the house down? The names they erased. The smell of stale cigarettes, mildew, and dust filled the air inside the crumbling motel room. Peeling wallpaper hung from the corners like tired skin, and the flickering ceiling fan clicked with a slow, ominous rhythm. Leo stood frozen, his eyes locked on the wall. It was covered from floor to ceiling in photographs, articles, names, and strings of red yarn connecting people, places, and tragedies. It looked like the mind map of a conspiracy theorist, but it wasn't. It was the truth, and it was terrifying. Journalists who died in accidents, judges who overdosed despite clean records, whistleblowers whose homes accidentally caught fire. Their faces stared out from the wall, all connected, all erased. And at the center of it all was Patrick Langley, the real estate tycoon who had orchestrated Alina Rhodes' death. Isabella stood just behind Leo, eyes wide, hand over her mouth. She took a step forward, staring at a photo near the center. Her mother, younger, smiling, holding baby Isabella in her arms. Pinned right below her photo, in red ink, TAR GT, eliminated. Leo felt his jaw clench. Mason Kane stood silently near the doorway, arms crossed, watching them both. Vin Drake, the man they had come to see, the former cleaner, fixer, and eraser, leaned against the nightstand, cigarette in hand. She was never supposed to survive, Vin said quietly, nodding toward Isabella. Your mother was smart, smarter than the rest, but not smart enough to stop looking. Why was she targeted? Isabella asked, her voice trembling. What did she uncover? Vin took a long drag and exhaled. She found the list, he said. The same one you did. Only back then, it was just names and offshore accounts. Dirty judges, dirty senators, law enforcement moles. Your mother wanted to go to the press. She was murdered, Leo said. Execution style. Vin nodded. And the man who pulled the trigger was one of mine. Leo stepped forward. Why are you telling us this now? Why didn't you disappear? Vin's eyes darkened. I tried, he said. But you don't get out of this world unless they let you. I faked my death 5 years ago, buried every tie I had. But the past doesn't forget. He walked to the wall and tapped a photo with his finger. This list you found, Isabella, it's not just names. It's leverage. Every name on there is connected to something. A crime, a body, a secret. He looked her dead in the eye. They won't stop. Not until they're sure you're gone. And now that you've survived, now that you've seen, you have 2 choices. Which are? Leo asked. Vin raised a hand. 1. Vanish. I know people. You get new identities, disappear forever. You live, but you never stop running. 2. Vin's face twisted. Expose them, but if you do, you'll start a war. A TNC silence. The room felt heavier after those words. Isabella stared at the flash drive in her hands like it was radioactive. Why did you keep all this? She asked Vin softly. Why not destroy it? Vin took a breath. His voice softened. Because I couldn't forget them. He motioned to the wall. These people were brave. They stood up when it would have been easier to kneel. I killed some. I watched others die. But I remember everyone. He looked at Isabella. And your mother, she begged me. Right before she died, she said, if my daughter lives, help her understand why I had to die. Leo blinked hard, his throat tightening. Vin continued. That's why I kept the files. That's why I mapped it all. Not for vengeance. Not even for justice. Just so someone could finish what she started. Mason's PA case. We have a way, Mason said. He stepped forward and pulled a flash drive of his own from his coat pocket. If we broadcast the right names, the right data, to the right places, leak it wide, we burn the whole network. Political offices, private firms, shell corporations, everything. Leo nodded. But we'll be hunted. Vin snorted. You're already being hunted. The moment she survived that snowbank, they put every resource on high alert. They'll silence witnesses, crash servers, wipe everything. Then we hit first, Mason said. Isabella looked at the wall again, her voice barely audible. Would it matter? Everyone turned to her. Even if we exposed them, would it matter? What if people don't care? What if it's too big? What if they bury it like they buried her? Leo walked to her side. It'll matter, he said, because truth always matters, and because your mother died believing it did. Don't let that light go out. She looked at him for a long, quiet moment, then gave a single, resolute nod. I want to fight, she whispered. Not for me. For her. Vin's eyes glistened just for a moment. Then let's begin. The plan. For the next 3 hours, the room turned into a war room. Mason opened multiple encrypted laptops. Leo used burner phones to reach safe contacts from his old trucking days. People he trusted to move without asking questions. Vin decrypted layers of protection on old intel files that tied major figures to crimes buried under shell companies and sealed court records. They worked fast, but not carelessly. The clock was ticking. Vin pulled out a thumb-sized GPS jammer and tossed it to Leo. Put that in your truck. It'll scramble your location for a few miles if they start tracking. Mason wrote a list of names on the motel mirror with lipstick. Cheap, bright red, the only thing available in the vending machine outside. These are your first wave targets, he said. 2 senators, 1 federal judge, and a media CEO. They go down, the rest get scared. But it'll trigger a response, Vin warned. The moment this list hits the web, Someone will send a cleaner. Leo narrowed his eyes. Let them come. A final moment of DUBT. As they packed up, Isabella stood in the bathroom, staring at her reflection. Her hands shook. Leo appeared in the doorway. You okay? She didn't answer for a moment. Then, I'm scared. Leo nodded. Good. That means you're still human. He stepped closer. You don't have to be fearless to be brave. You just have to move forward, even when your legs want to stop. She looked at him. You could walk away. I could, he said, but then I'd live knowing I left behind the one thing that could change everything. He smiled. And besides, I made a promise. She smiled, tears in her eyes. To her. To you. Somewhere far away. A dark room. A man sat in front of a bank of monitors, each one showing a different feed. City streets, drone footage, traffic cameras. The face of Isabella Rhodes appeared on screen. A red tar GT active icon blinked. The man picked up a secure phone. They found Drake, he said. Pause. Yes, the girl's still alive, and Mason Kane is with her. Long silence. Then he nodded. I'll send him. He hung up. Then picked up another phone and dialed a single digit. A voice answered. Ragged. Cold. The kind of voice that made men tremble. It's time, the man said. The girl survived. A pause. Then the voice replied, like gravel dragged across steel. I'm already on the road. The cleaner. It was 1:14 a.m. A thick silence blanketed the outskirts of East Hollow, a dying town near the Arkansas border. A single gas station stood like a relic at the edge of the road, its flickering neon sign casting ghostly blue light on the cracked pavement. Leo's truck was parked behind the building, obscured from the highway. The SUV was gone. Mason had taken it north to set up a decoy trail. Vin had slipped away on foot hours earlier, armed with a burner phone and a list of final data drop sites. Inside the gas station, the windows were papered over. Lights dimmed. Security cameras blacked out. Leo stood by the front door, Glock tucked in his belt. Isabella sat cross-legged behind the cashier counter, her eyes fixed on the flash drive clutched in her hand. Her hands trembled slightly. Not from fear, at least not only fear, but from the anticipation of what came next. They had done it. The file had been uploaded to 9 mirrored servers across the globe. Every name, every deal, every betrayal. The world didn't know it yet, but in a few hours, it would. Leo glanced at his watch. Mason was late. Too late. And that's when it happened. The lights went out. Total blackness swallowed the gas station. No hum from the fridge. No buzz from the bulbs. The heaters went dead. Just the sound of the wind scraping against the glass. Leo's blood froze. He didn't move. Didn't breathe. He knew this wasn't a random outage. This was a message. He's here. Somewhere in the darkness. Outside. A man stepped out of the trees, his boots soundless in the snow. He wore no armor, no heavy coat. Just a black shirt, a black scarf around his neck, and a worn duffel bag hanging at his side. His face was plain, unremarkable, a face designed to be forgotten. But his eyes, those were unforgettable. Cold, flat, like nothing had ever touched his soul. His name was never spoken publicly. In whispers, they called him the cleaner, an eraser of people, an instrument of silence. And now he was here for Isabella Rhodes. Inside, moments later, Leo moved quickly but quietly, locking the front and rear doors. He shoved a shelf in front of the emergency exit, pulled Isabella closer and whispered, "We don't run. Not now." Her eyes were wide, but she nodded. Outside, the sound of crunching snow grew louder, then stopped. Silence again. Leo's breath caught in his throat. Then, a knock. Not hard, not rushed, just calm. 3 taps. As if the man outside wasn't breaking in, just letting them know they were already dead. Leo swallowed and crouched behind the counter with Isabella. He reached for the radio Mason had left behind. Static. Then a voice. Low, quiet, cold, cut through. Leo Hunter. Leo froze. He didn't recognize the voice, but somehow it recognized him. You've wandered back into a world that does not forget. Pause. You have something that belongs to my employers. Send it out, and you'll die tonight. Stay quiet, and I'll only take the girl. Isabella's lips trembled. Leo gritted his teeth. He grabbed the mic. You want her, he growled. Come and try. There was silence. Then, I hoped you'd say that. The first attaque. A glass bottle came crashing through the side window. It ignited midair, erupting in flames near the snack aisle. Molotov. Leo yanked Isabella to her feet and rushed her toward the back. He kicked open a service hatch near the cooler, something Mason had prepped in advance, and shoved her inside. Crawl through. It leads to the septic tunnel. Stay low. Keep moving. Don't look back. She shook her head. I'm not leaving you. Leo grabbed her face, voice low but firm. You're not running. You're surviving. There's a difference. You gave the world the truth. Now give it a future. Her eyes burned with tears, but she nodded. He closed the hatch behind her, locking it from the outside. Then he turned to face the flames. Inside the station, the front door burst open. Smoke rolled in like a living thing, and through it walked the man, the cleaner. No mask, no armor. Just him. Leo raised his gun. I've faced men like you, he called. No, the cleaner said calmly, you haven't. In a blur, the cleaner kicked over a metal display rack and used it as a shield. Leo fired twice, but the bullets sparked off steel. The cleaner closed the distance fast, too fast. He slammed into Leo, disarming him with a sharp twist. They crashed to the floor, fists flying. Leo punched. The cleaner dodged, kicked. Leo blocked, grabbed a broken piece of shelving, and stabbed forward. It grazed the cleaner's side. He didn't even flinch, just smiled. I see now why they fear you, the cleaner said, but it's not enough. Isabella's choice. Inside the tunnel, Isabella heard the fight above. Her lungs burned from smoke. She paused. Run. Keep going. Leave. But something inside her snapped. No, not this time. Not again. She turned back, climbed up, crawled through a vent, burst back into the station just in time to see the cleaner slam Leo against the wall, his knife drawn. Leo was pinned. Then, the voice. Isabella's. Hey. The cleaner turned. And that's when she pressed the button. She held a small transmitter, blinking red. The files. They're already uploaded, she said. But this sends the final confirmation. Every news station, every whistleblower group, every public forum. She stepped forward. You kill him. I send it. The cleaner's face didn't change. You won't, he said. Try me. And in that moment, for the first time in his career, the cleaner hesitated. He weighed the risk. Then, dropped the knife. Leo gasped for air as he collapsed to the floor. The cleaner took a step back. He looked at Isabella and said only one thing. They're going to send worse. Then he vanished into the smoke. The AFT-RMA-80. Leo lay on the floor, blood on his lip. Isabella knelt beside him, tears falling onto his coat. You came back, he said, smiling weakly. I'm not running anymore, she whispered. Sirens echoed in the distance. Mason's backup. They were safe, for now. Leo reached into his coat and pulled out a folded photo. Of Alina. He pressed it into Isabella's hand. She was right about you. Me and Voile. Far away. Inside a polished glass tower, a group of men and women watched the leaked files go viral. News anchors screamed. Government officials denied. FBI raids began. Whispers turned into roars, and at the head of the table sat Patrick Langley. His jaw clenched. He looked at his assistant. "Find her," he said. "And this time, make sure it's permanent. The fire they can't kill." The world didn't wake up slowly. It ignited. By 6:00 a.m., the flash drive's contents had spread across thousands of platforms, leaked simultaneously by Mason Kane's digital tripwire. CNN, BBC, Reuters, WikiLeaks, underground activist blogs, TikTok feeds, anonymous forums, radio stations, public billboards, even high school group chats. The story was everywhere. The names of judges, politicians, police chiefs, and media executives, all tied to a global network of bribery, silencing, and state-sanctioned murder. And at the center of it all, Isabella Rhodes, Washington, D.C., federal courthouse. Dozens of news vans packed the courthouse steps. Protesters screamed. Reporters swarmed officials for statements. Inside, a team of federal agents pored over documents now confirmed by the leaked data. And across multiple screens in a secure room, grainy footage of Isabella, her face partially obscured, her voice steady, played on loop. "My name is Isabella Rhodes. I am the daughter of Alina Rhodes. She was killed for trying to expose this system. Now I am continuing her work. Not for revenge, for justice." The video ended. The silence that followed was louder than the screams outside. Meanwhile, abandoned de Fair Mejoas, Tennessee backroads. Leo Hunter stood outside, scanning the tree line with a pair of binoculars. His side still ached from his fight with the cleaner, but he was alive, and more focused than ever. Inside the farmhouse, Mason and Isabella were preparing for the next phase. "You really want to do this?" Mason asked, watching Isabella type another message to a global whistleblower group. She looked up, fire in her eyes. "They'll try to twist the truth, water it down, paint me as unstable or dangerous. But if I keep speaking, if I keep telling people what happened, then I stay in control of my story." Mason nodded slowly. "You sound just like her." "Good," Isabella said, without blinking. "Because I never got to tell her goodbye." FLASHBACK. Younger Isabella, age 6. Alina Rhodes smiled as she tucked her daughter in for the last time. The night before the raid, before the betrayal. "Promise me, Mama, we'll always be together. Always, baby. Even if you can't see me, I'll always be right here," she said, placing a hand over Isabella's tiny heart. That was the last night she ever saw her. Until now. Present, Vin Drake or returns. The farmhouse door creaked open. Vin Drake stepped in, battered, bleeding, but alive. "They're making moves," he said. "Langley's pulled every string he has. Local PDs are being federalized. You've got less than 48 hours before someone issues a black bag order." Leo frowned. "You sure?" Vin tossed a burner phone onto the table. A text glowed on the screen. "Rhodes girl is priority red. Disappear her. Agent K." Isabella took a slow breath. "Then we move now." The plan. The last strike. They didn't run. They fought back. Mason contacted 5 international journalists and gave them raw interviews with source files. He linked Alina's death to the senator who covered it up. Leo used old contacts from his trucking days. Veterans, hackers, conspiracy junkies, people who knew how to operate outside the grid. Vin, using backdoor codes only someone like him would know, exposed bank accounts, shell corporations, and laundering trails that led directly to Patrick Langley. They coordinated one final upload, the Black File, a 2 gigabytes document containing every name, document, voice memo, and surveillance photo from the cleaner's kill ledger. including the orders that had been placed on Isabella's mother. They weren't just burning bridges. They were collapsing the whole highway. Meanwhile, L'Angeli's Anal Pile, in a luxury tower in Manhattan, Patrick Langley paced inside a war room. "Get me the cleaner," he barked. A woman in a suit swallowed. "He's gone dark." "Then send the others." "Sir, that list. I built an empire on silence," Langley hissed, "and I'll kill to keep it quiet." His voice broke. But no one listened, because on the screen behind him, his face was everywhere. Breaking news, recorded phone calls, hidden camera videos. The storm was already here. Langley turned to a wall-mounted safe, spun the lock, and pulled out a pistol. "If they want a war, Farmhouse raid. Have I nailed show Dioden?" 3 black SUVs roared through the forest trail, snow spraying behind them. Leo looked up. "We've got company." Vin pulled a shotgun from under the floorboards. Mason locked and loaded 2 sidearms. Isabella grabbed a backup drive and the satellite transmitter. "No more running," she whispered. The fight. The agents moved in. But this wasn't just a farmhouse. Mason had rigged traps, wired motion sensors, and triggered EMP devices that fry their comms. Leo fought like a man with nothing left to lose. Fists, fury, purpose. Vin took a bullet to the shoulder, but still dragged 2 agents down before collapsing. Isabella ran to the clearing, transmitter in hand. A single agent pursued. Then, boom, the cabin exploded, just the side wall, enough to scatter the agents and give Mason the upper hand. The remaining soldier reached Isabella. He tackled her to the ground. Gun raised. Then, Karakeke. A single shot rang out. The soldier collapsed. Behind him, standing in the trees, the cleaner, gun still smoking. Isabella gasped. He stepped forward. No words, just a nod. And then, like a phantom, he was gone. The FINALMESSAG. At sunrise, Isabella stood on a hill, her jacket flapping in the cold wind. She faced the camera Mason held and spoke into it. "We were told we were too small, too broken, too late. But when you shine a light long enough, shadows run out of places to hide. My name is Isabella Rhodes. My mother died trying to tell the truth. Today, we finish what she started." 6 months later, senators arrested. Langley found dead in a private jet crash. Cause: suspected internal betrayal. Dozens of trials underway. Protest movements grew. People marched wearing shirts with Alina and Isabella's names. Leo opened a non-profit for whistleblowers, named The Road Back. Mason disappeared, again. Rumor was he was in Iceland, building servers for Freedom of Information groups. Vin's fate? Unknown. But someone leaked another cache of evidence a month later, labeled, "From the Ghost." And Isabella? She spoke at the UN. No security detail. No mask. She stood tall, strong, a living fire. You can silence a voice. You can bury a body. But you can't kill the fire of the truth. Not when it's passed down like a promise. Not when it's lit in a daughter's heart.